Today we'll be looking into Elvis Presley and his wife and daughter. First of all, we've got a glimpse into what he looked like as a child, and his parents' appearance. Note how the mother's skull is significantly smaller than the husband's. She has a narrow jaw in comparison to his. Her chin comes to a point. The spacing between her features is small. The cheekbones are not sharp and prominent. There is some roundness to her cheek. It's not gaunt, it's filled in, and that indicates that she has female subcutaneous fat levels. Her eyes are quite close set. Her forehead is a little long, but note that the man's forehead is yet longer. He has a very visible Adam's apple. His face is broader, all of his facial bones are stronger, and he has a wider spacing to the features. As for Elvis, he's exhibiting an energy that suggests male identity to me. Even as a baby and a child, his energy is clearly male. His eyes are wide-spaced, as are his other features. He definitely has the demeanour of a boy, and his father is very obviously a real male. He's got a long brow, he's got big ears, wide-spaced features, all more common on males. More of the same. When he's aged a bit more, his face shape is undeniably male. There's wide-spaced features. The upper lip is significantly smaller than the lower, which is a dimension typically found on males. Females' upper lips tend to be more equal in size to their lower lips. There's visible development in the trachea. The neck is thick. Shoulders look like you could fit 3 head widths on them, also typical of a male. If I had to judge, I'd say this individual may have what's called an endomorph body type, which is a type that gains and maintains extra fat levels. Males and females can be either this type, ectomorphic, which is the opposite, or mesomorph, which is a type that more easily gains and loses weight and typically holds muscle more easily. I don't actually place tons of stock in these classifications, and plenty of people seem to have sort of a mixture of these types. But what I'm basically saying is that with different genetics, different people have different body conformation. But look at how straight his body is. It's very male looking. Some men have a hard time building and maintaining muscle, and some also naturally hold fat more than others. Looks like Elvis is not very built, and he looks a little bit soft, but at the same time you can still see his bones, and his jawline is still sharper than I'd expect on a girl of this sort of size, of average size. In both of these photos, however, we can see that Elvis' abdomen is totally straight up and down. There is no pelvic tilt as there should be seen on a woman. His hands look big. His back is not arched, it's completely straight. Look at that large rib cage. Males develop larger rib cages to allow for greater oxygen intake to support athletic performance, as that is the primary biological design of males, whereas females' primary design is childbearing. Again, note the lack of pelvic tilt. Straight body. Elvis does have long legs, but they're male, and we can see that the widest part of the pelvis is not at or below, but it's about up here. The Q angle is not acute, the legs are just straight. Again, Elvis has a little bit of spare flesh, and the long white underwear fools the eye into believing the hips are wider than they are. Look at the big rib cage, the lack of pelvic tilt. He's got a male arm length, with the crotch just reaching the wrist, and he's got a square shoulder shape. The collarbones are quite straight, but with some trapezius muscle development. He does have some muscle on the chest and the core. He just also has a little bit of fat. He's not like the kind of the modern idol that would be very low percentage of body fat, because back then they weren't obsessed with that. So I don't actually think there's anything strange with this physique. Again, he has a male Q angle, male straight thighs, nothing strange here. Shoulders could definitely support 3 head widths. His arm is held out to accommodate this holster, and the feet are placed as though on opposite sides of a line, unlike the way females walk, more on a line due to the female Q angle positioning female feet closer to one another when walking and standing. He's got a completely boxy, straight male torso. Again, this ribcage is just too big for a female. The arms are long, the legs are straight. Completely straight back. He's not bulging with muscle and he's not totally tiny and skinny and lean and whatever, but he looks just like a very average person. These are male legs. Some men have longer legs than others, and Elvis is one of those. He's leggy. Again, he does have a little bit more fat than the typical male ideal of these days, but the skeletal structure is male, and taking hormones doesn't alter the growth of the skeleton, which is coded for in DNA. All hormones do is change the flesh, but Elvis' flesh looks male too, and his skeleton is male. Back looks straight. The lower part of the lower leg tapers to a thinner sort of size, and on real females they have more of a gradual curve, which means that he doesn't have as much subcutaneous body fat as a female. Again, straight legs and straight torso, no pelvic tilt, big rib cage, big shoulders. His feet look big too. See the narrowness of the pelvis? There is no room for a baby in there, and nowhere for it to come out. The legs are too close together. It's a narrow, long male pelvis. His torso is boxy. He's not extremely built, not extremely thin, again, just average, but the mindset of the population at the time wasn't so gym-obsessed, so when people were held to a different standard of attractiveness, you'd see more variation in body types, even at a fairly normal, average, healthy size, so to speak. The back is straight. There's no pelvic tilt. This is just back muscle here, and then there's very narrow, the hips and everything, it's very narrow and straight down here in this region. No curving, no tilting. Again, he is a little soft. I think people might take issue with that, but he clearly has muscle too. And usually if FTMs are soft and of small size like this, like if they're not taking steroids and they're just this size, if they're soft, it's usually they don't have much in the way of muscle. But he's got that balance because he's actually male. The typical fat levels are still different between men and women, but yeah, we can tell this pelvis is definitely smaller than the shoulders. The mass is all up in the upper part of his body. Look at that totally straight torso. The widest point of the pelvis is above the crotch. That's male. The legs are straight and male. There's no pelvic tilt. This is just a very long, rectangular shape. It's a man. Straight back is definitely straight. Elvis is pretty bendy and is capable of arching his back, but males are capable of this. They just don't have an arch in a default stance. MTFs who do yoga or dance, and real men who are dancers, acrobats, or even contortionists are capable of bending their backs, but the difference is the default position of the back is not curved. On a real female, there's always going to be a slight change in direction. Like, different women have different extremes to their spinal arch. Some have very pronounced spinal arches, some you can barely tell it's there, but you can tell, and it would be up high. It would be where his ribcage is still coming down. So again, with the long straight spine. Wearing the trousers higher increases the apparent size of the lower body on males, but we've seen the pelvis is narrower than the hips, than the shoulders already. This appears to be a photoshopped image, but what it's showing us is a flat male back. Elvis' torso is really too big to be a girl's. You'd be hard-pressed to find a natural female from Caucasian heritage with this kind of ribcage. Again, there's no pelvic tilt. Totally straight body, barrel chest. Posterior looks male. Thighs look male. Straight back, and yes, long legs, but they do look male. Compare his square jaw and his chin, his protruding brow to give him hooded eyes, his more prominent cheekbones, to her narrower jaw, the minimal female brow ridge, and rounded forehead, the round cheeks, smaller chin, more delicate features on the face. Compare his longer humerus bone, his bonier shoulders right around here, compared to hers, it's smoother. His ankles down here look narrower than hers. Hers have a gradual curve. This is because she has higher subcutaneous body fat levels because she's a female and he's a male. His feet are bigger than hers, his back is straight. We can tell that she's tilting her pelvis forward and leaning her body backward, the back backward, in this shot because of the curve protruding at the front, showing that she's sort of pressing her body forward and upward a little bit, the lower body. And we can also see that the spine arches at a higher point on her, while on him it's just straight. He has no pelvic tilt. He does have a fairly sizable backside, which is also not that common on Caucasian males, but all skeletal traits on him are male, while hers are female. She has tapered fingers, her hips are wide. You can tell that her legs spring from wider points compared to his, from the pelvis. As you can see, there isn't much space here where his legs are. There's just, his pelvis is very narrow and the legs come out of it closer together compared to hers. The lighting here is highlighting his extra midsection fat. He's also popping the hip closer to us, toward us, so one could incorrectly assess his figure here, but it's still lacking pelvic tilt, the ribcage is still big, the spine is still straight. His knees are also knobbier than hers. His elbows are pointier. I find that usually male elbows tend to be pointier than females, it's more rounded. His feet are bigger, his hands are bigger, his wrists are thicker. And again, note the different skull sizes and male traits on his, and the female on hers. Again, straight male back, straight male legs, straight male torso. Pelvis isn't tilted, this is obviously a male skeleton. He's not rippling with muscle, he's not bone thin, but he's male. That's a narrow pelvis, bigger rib cage, shoulders are 3 head widths. Again, the shoulders are 3 head widths. Straight male torso, big male rib cage, nothing strange going on in the chest, just very normal looking pectoral region. He does have, from the front on, he does have a fairly oval shaped face, but we've already seen from other angles that the bones are actually very developed nonetheless, with too much width and squareness to the jaw and too much jutting to the brow to look female. He does appear to have a widow's peak, but a good number of males possess this trait. Note the straight male legs and how the pelvis is clearly narrower than the shoulders. Both are twisted to sort of the same degree, the pelvis going that direction, the shoulders going that direction, so we can visually assess the width comparison. The legs are long, but they have male dimensions. There are so many types of facial features and skull traits in varying populations, but we can see that Elvis has a slight slope to the brow, protruding brow bones, and his skull is large, and the bones developed. Priscilla, on the other hand, has little to no brow ridge. It's just, there's a bit of skin here, but this is mostly a rounded brow. She's got rounded cheeks, she's got a narrow jaw, small mouth, sloped shoulders, an arch high in the back. As a little girl, she looks like a little girl to me. Very mild energy. Little children will often be gangly or have ears that stick out and so forth, but the features are small and close-spaced. This looks like a girl. High subcutaneous fat levels that create a softness to this jaw and the pointed chin. Delicate nose, widow's peak. The facial features are close-spaced. Shoulders are sloping at a skeletal level, which is commonly seen on women, though sometimes women have square shoulders and sometimes males have more sloped ones. Traits directly linked to childbirth will be constant in all populations, and those skeletal traits are most important, while everything else just adds to the picture and gives weight to final assessments. Small wrist, just a girly kind of energy. How thick and sturdy his hands look compared to hers, with her delicate tapered fingers and his broader ones. His skull is bigger, his brow is more sloped, his brow bones protrude more. All of his facial features are more projected than hers, and she has feminine softness to the face. She has a lot of eye makeup on here, and it might make people who are awake to the androgynous agenda automatically equate her to the MDF celebrities we usually see on screen who have similar makeup styles to this. However, when she wears less makeup, she looks like a very normal, pretty girl. Someone you could imagine meeting in everyday life, not with that strange factor some other celebrities possess. That is definitely a female skull. Delicate female neck, too. He carries some extra weight around the jaw, but even so you can see a definite bulge there, his Adam's apple. Again, compare skulls. His is male, hers is female, and there's Lisa Marie. Elvis' energy is focused and projected. Priscilla's is mild and draws you in. His eyes are wider spaced, his skull is broader and larger, his shoulders are larger. Yes, there are shoulder pads, but we've seen his shoulders are larger all the time. You can see his Adam's apple. Testosterone treatments can develop an Adam's apple to some degree, but it's usually very unconvincing, and on a person with all this soft tissue around his neck like Elvis has, an unnatural and therefore smaller Adam's apple would be very unlikely to be visible. Lisa Marie's energy also looks soft to me. It's like her mother's. Now these people have different ancestry as well, so they're going to have different kinds of facial traits, and it won't be like if we compared two people from the same population and saw that, the male was directly had directly more pronounced traits in all regards than the female, because they're not, they have mixed ancestry, they're Americans. So, while females often tend to have kind of smaller eyes than males, and males have like wider eyes like this, we have the opposite here in this case, and from front on he does have more of a sort of pointed chin, but this is the thing, different populations have different kinds of looks within them. This definitely looks like a little girl to me. Again, note Elvis' jaw strength and the bulging Adam's apple. Priscilla's every facial trait is female. Lisa Marie also looks female, and she looks more like Elvis to me than Priscilla. But given the nature of genetics, plenty of people look more like the opposite gender parent of theirs than their own gender parent. She does have fairly strong facial features, but if she was male, the face would be gaunter and the bones yet more prominent. She's got delicate wrists. Even at a slender size, there is visible fatty tissue on the upper arms, which usually the famous MTFs don't have, instead having long bony arms. She has a small waist and hips that are round at a high point, meaning there's room to carry a baby up there in the pelvis, while the widest point is right there, below the crotch, as it should be on the female. See the leg angling inward from that point? That's the female Q angle. Immediately one can notice that the majority of the mass of this person's body is lower down. Shoulders are not as wide as the hips. These are childbearing hips. There's obvious pelvic tilt, even with some muscle on the legs. See that you can tell there's kind of dimpling of fat around here. The cited numbers are that at least 90% of women have cellulite. I know that I've seen plenty of very fit, healthy girls and women who have it. Usually MTFs don't have as much, or any, though apparently increasing estrogen levels greatly can cause the appearance of it, presumably through changing the skin composition over time and altering the strength of the lattice work of cells that hold fat cells, weakening them as found in women, and thus causing this appearance. Still, in most cases, we don't see it on famous MTFs. There is no rib removal. People always seem to cite that on these old ones, but on these ones from the past, But see how her ribs angle inward? It's a very natural, gradual curve, and you can follow the whole line of her ribs. That's the shape of the female ribcage. She has a high female waist, the navel's below, long legs, female arm length, with the crotch level reaching to the palm. Her neck is held taut, causing the trachea to stand out more. One can observe the tension in her neck. But look how wide the hips are, how curvy the legs are. That's definitely a female figure. Again, little sloped shoulders compared to wide hips, all the mass down here, small rib cage, curvy hips and legs, widest point below the crotch, female Q angle, female skeleton, and we know what that means. The mass is all in the lower body. The shoulders are small, the rib cage is really small, the legs and hips are curvy. Well, I should point out that a lot of the mass is in the hair too, but hey, it was the 60s. Softness to the upper arms, which look fairly short, as it should be on a female. Delicate hands, delicate wrists, small rib cage, round shape to the hips, high and low. Female Q angle, female facial traits. The fellow next to her has long hanging arms from wide shoulders. He's got narrower hips. He's got legs that look straight, as well as a long, thick neck with a pronounced trachea, which she does not have here. He's got wider spaced facial features, a broader, heftier skull. Priscilla's trachea stands out here because she's turning and looks a bit tense again, but her shoulders are sloped. Her skeletal dimensions remain as we've seen. Elvis's pelvis is narrower than his shoulders. His chest is broad and sizable, unlike the FTMs we often see. His legs are straight and he's walking like a man, his legs side by side. He's got a totally straight body line. Again, his body line is straight. We can see he has some quad muscles, but the Q angle on his legs begins very high. There's no actual curve to the legs, straight on both sides. Boxy male torso. He's got straight legs and wider shoulders and bigger feet. Their gaze is focused on the camera, but it doesn't have that piercing quality that a male gaze has. Again, Lisa Marie has more of her father's traits visibly in my opinion, but there are no jutting facial bones on her, and the spacing of her features looks feminine. This photo of Lisa Marie does look odd, but I think it's probably a matter of styling, posing holding the shoulders shrugged upward, and sucking air into the ribcage, increasing its size, and the dress making the shoulders look wider by highlighting the skin's lighter colour against the dark shoulder, which is just below her real shoulder. Looks like one hand may have a male digit ratio, the other has equal fingers, but digit ratio is often off in people, or not the same on both hands, and it's hard to measure when hands are interacting with anything anyway. It does look like Lisa Marie has a natural looking roundness to the hips at a high point, as well as the lower width, appearing equal to the shoulders, however. As for Priscilla, again the makeup instantly gives the face a very fake, strange look, but the features under that makeup are actually female. A little strong, but perfectly in alignment with normal parameters for female skulls. Elvis is the opposite, of course. Now this is quite the shot. Looks like Lisa Marie is again sucking in air, but she does appear to have a spinal arch while walking. Most MTF's models fake a spinal arch in bikini or underwear photo shoots, but they generally don't fake the arch well in motion. Lisa Marie is a fairly tough one, so I imagine there'll be some division on her. As for Priscilla, I don't like the energy in her at all in this photo. Most people don't appear to be this pleased by having their photos taken by the paparazzi. Again, Priscilla appears very pleased at the attention. She's clearly had Botox and probably some injections and other cosmetic work done by this point, and her energy remains female, but now feels overlaid with some kind of narcissistic vanity, in my opinion. As for Lisa Marie, see the softness around her jawline, and how it angles at more of a curve instead of going back and being squarer. She looks a lot like Elvis, so it's easy to compare her skull and his jaw was squarer and expanded farther than hers, while hers angles upward a little and is softened by female fat levels. She hasn't got the brow ridge he had, and her upper lip is larger than his was in comparison to the lower. Nothing odd in her neck. Not liking Priscilla's energy at all in this image. Just a random note that I think they are both still Scientologists. I think Lisa Marie was brought up in it, and I hear it's quite difficult to leave it. Anyway, Lisa Marie's dental arch is female. Her nose looks natural, but it's very delicate and small. She doesn't have big brow ridges. There is softness in the cheeks. There's nothing odd in the neck. Priscilla's got those obviously female hips and Q angle at an older age as well. Not to sound like a broken record, but I don't like this energy. The face is clearly worked on, but essentially the dimensions of the bone and the underlying energy in the eyes indicate the person is female. Lisa Marie really looks like Elvis, but in every way the feminine version. Her face is not as broad, the cheekbones not as prominent, the eyes not as wide set, the lips more feminine, the jaw and chin smaller, the brow bones smaller. She has a vertical forehead with no protruding brow bones. There's no jutting or ridging in the trachea, delicate nose, feminine mouth width, the jaw is not sharp, and compared to Elvis's, his went farther back and was squarer. Now compared to the earlier photos that I had of her walking, she's not inhaling deeply in this photo, and now you can see she's definitely got a female ribcage size. The body begins to expand after the waist, and the spine is clearly curved, even while she's walking. Looks like there's that pelvic tilt too. I've seen real women who look like this. I'll be honest and say this isn't the body type most women aspire to, but it is a real female body type, what is often called the apple body type. The shoulders tend to be a little burlier in this kind of woman, the torso a little thicker and wider all the way through, but look at the hips and see how they match up to the shoulder joints. There is definite roundness to the hips at a high point as well as lower, and there's high female waist indentation points. You can tell the pelvis is wide, can hold a child in there. Q angle is female. The arms have to angle out to accommodate wider hips. She also holds a fair bit of muscle, but her legs gradually curve down here as seen on women. Those are female hips, definitely. They're equal to the shoulders at the widest points. Then you can tell the widest point of her curve there is below the crotch, but it's also the roundness high up, the gradual curve that's important. Natural fullness above that point. This does look like an apple body type. Now I knew nothing about her before researching her, but I found out she was involved with Michael Jackson at one point. First of all, look at the female skull dimensions on her. Small nose, no brow ridge, softness in the face, mouth small, pointed chin, widow's peak, and then note her gentle female energy. It's very, very subdued. I've heard people say Michael Jackson was female, but he may have actually been a eunuch, chemically or physically castrated. He has a thick trachea, he has a wide jaw and chin, he's got a wide mouth, wide-spaced eyes, big shoulders. His energy isn't like Lisa Marie's. Note how straight Michael Jackson's back is, and his front, no pelvic tilt whatsoever. On the other hand, see how Lisa Marie's back curves inward and then outward again from a high point? She's got a very small ribcage again. Her humerus bone is very short, the elbow is very soft, there's nothing jutting in the neck, her forehead is very flat. Look at her spinal arch here. It's way more arched than one sees on MTFs. Comes properly in at a high point and goes back out. That's definitely a female spinal arch. Look at Michael Jackson. The widest part of his pelvis is above the crotch. It's here. And his legs are completely straight, and they spring from a very close point here. There's no space here. This is a narrow male pelvis. He looks way bulkier than Lisa Marie, And yes, his shoulders are padded, but judging from how the arms hang, you can tell the actual shoulders are definitely wider than the hips. See here, her hand is hanging in front of her hip, but if she shifted her shoulder back, rotated it, so that her arm was hanging more right at her side, then the arms would have to angle out at the elbow to accommodate this curve here. That's a big, straight male back, definitely not female. She's got hips equal to shoulders. Her round hips gradually curve downward from a high waist, with the widest point being just below the crotch. She has an acute female Q angle. He's got wider shoulders, narrower hips, straight legs. Honestly, the voice he had shouldn't be possible for an adult male to have unless he was a castrato, so I don't really know what that means for the kind of relationship these people had when they were married, or allegations made against him. That's another matter entirely. Lisa Marie is frequently shrugging her shoulders upward, and it makes them appear wider and squarer, but look at that softness all around here, and see how they are sloping. See the obvious female curve to the thighs, the roundness of the hips, the small hands, female arm length, crotch level to palm, lack of visible bones like one would typically see on an average sized male, can't see anything, female Q angle, widest point of hips below the crotch, but hips suitably round and full to indicate wide female hips underneath at a skeletal level. Arms angle out. There's gradual curve to the legs, and yes, she's a bit more muscular than some women, but there are all kinds of body types out there. See how obviously female her Q angle is? She's not putting on a fake walk, the curves naturally exist on both sides, and she steps with her feet more one in front of the other, whereas the man's legs are totally straight, and he steps with his feet side by side. His pelvis is narrower than his shoulders, while both appear equal on her. Again, she's shrugging up the shoulders, but the pelvis is wide. There's space to carry a child up there, and you can tell the legs are springing from a wider point in this pelvis. You can tell there's space here. This is definitely a female pelvis shape. I'm just gonna ignore Nick Cage. She's sucking in her stomach here, thus increasing the ribcage size again. But yes, there is pelvic tilt. And yes, there's curve to the legs. And that arch to the spine, you can see it's coming inward up here at the high point. Through that gap you can see it, and then it goes back outward. I'm going to ignore the guy with the Afghan hound hair. Again, this is a great example of a natural female with an apple body type. See that the pelvis is still suitably wide for childbearing. The hips are round, all the way up and down as they should be from the waist all the way through. The widest point is below the crotch. Q angle is clearly acute and female. Female looking fatty tissue on the short upper arms, softness everywhere else, even with muscle. It's totally smooth knees, that's subcutaneous female body fat levels doing that. Gradual curves, female hands. That looks like a real pregnancy to me. Looks like there's a bit of fluid retention, some weight gain. Same deal here. Short female arms. We can obviously see the arch in the back, even through several layers of clothing. Lisa Marie is a woman whose back isn't held in an extremely arched shape normally, but the structure is there at a skeletal level, and it's designed precisely for this time, pregnancy. See how even through those two layers of clothing we can see that obvious spinal arch, which is more pronounced at this point because of the weight of the baby she's carrying, which is pulling down on that spine. Women have varying degrees of spinal arches naturally, but the purpose of that arch is to suspend and distribute the weight of a baby at the front of the body during a pregnancy and avoid spinal injury. Males have straight spines for greater sturdiness and strength. They're engineered for other purposes such as hunting, fighting, and other strenuous labor. and female backs are actually a bit flimsy for those things. This is the primary reason for the design of the female spine. That is absolutely a pregnant woman. Extra fat in the face, the pregnant glow. I think the hand even looks a little swollen, so that's definitely some fluid retention. You can tell there's weight gain everywhere. She's gained it in all places. Yeah, she's pregnant alright. Looks like her mammary glands have also expanded, but it's obviously not implants. It's just another result of pregnancy, and you can tell this is just very natural. This is definitely a pregnant woman. And look at that pelvic tilt. Both sides. Absolutely a female. Short arms, arched spine, curved legs, small skull, and short neck. All skeletal traits are female. Compare any shot like this to a similar one of Elvis, and it's really like looking at a female and male type with lots of shared DNA. All of her facial bones are less bold, the features closer spaced and smaller. This is a woman, ladies and gents. So no matter what the story with Elvis' death is, no matter how famous they are, who they were involved with, what power they worshipped and worship, these are three natural gendered people. The androgynous agenda has made use of biological males and females, and actually would fail without them, as these initial stages require us to be shown people of all types, inverted and natural, and be told there's no difference in order for us to truly unlearn correct gender traits. Well, I'm just here to continue to point them out. The skeleton is the key, and Elvis's was male, while Priscilla and Lisa Marie's are female. And that's that.